A distress signal spread through the galaxy like a whisper in the dark. It reached every major empire, every listening post, every advanced civilization. The message was brief. Help us. They are coming. No name, no coordinates, just those 5 words. At first, many dismissed it as a glitch, an old transmission bouncing across the void. But then, the message repeated. Again and again, every hour. Some civilizations ignored it, too focused on their wars and politics. Others grew nervous. Who was calling for help? And more importantly, who was coming? The Tar Dominion, one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, decided to investigate. Their leader, Supreme Warlord Varric, ordered a fleet of scout ships to track the signal. The ships disappeared without a trace. No distress calls, no wreckage, just gone. Panic spread across the stars. If the Tar scouts had vanished, this was not a simple mystery. Something dangerous was out there. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the strongest species, held an emergency meeting. Fear filled the Grand Hall as leaders debated their next move. Some wanted to send warships. Others wanted to shut down all communications and hide. Then the humans got involved. Humanity was a young race compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy, but they were known for their curiosity and their recklessness. While other species hesitated, a human exploration fleet, led by Captain Elias Carter, made its way toward the last known location of the signal. Carter was experienced, a man who had seen the worst of the galaxy. He believed that answers were worth the risk. As the human ships neared the signal's source, their scanners picked up something unusual. There was something moving in deep space, just beyond the range of their instruments. It was massive, almost the size of a moon, but there were no energy readings, no transmissions. It floated through the void like a ghost. The crew watched in silence as the dark object slowly turned. It had no lights, no visible engines, just a surface covered in deep scars, as if it had survived 1,000 battles. Then, without warning, a message echoed through every ship's speakers. "You should not have come." The crew froze. The voice was mechanical, cold, almost like a whisper, but the message was clear. Captain Carter clenched his fists. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady. No answer. The object remained still, as if waiting. The human fleet sent drones forward, trying to get a closer look. The moment the first drone crossed a certain point, everything changed. The dark object activated. Energy surged across its surface. Strange symbols lit up, shifting and pulsing. A deep hum filled the ships as if space itself was vibrating. Then one of the human ships vanished. No explosion, no debris, just gone. 1 second it was there, the next, it wasn't. The remaining ships scrambled, alarms blaring, as Captain Carter shouted orders. They tried to fall back, but the object moved. Fast, faster than anything they had ever seen. For the first time in his life, Carter felt fear crawl up his spine. The Galactic Council received the report just minutes later. A deep silence filled the meeting chamber as they listened to Carter's last transmission before cutting communications. "We made contact. It is not friendly. I repeat, it is not friendly." The leaders of the galaxy looked at each other, their fear now turning into something worse. Dread. Because whatever was out there, it had been waiting. And now, it was awake. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of his ship, the Resolute, his eyes locked onto the dark mass drifting through space. The thing was unlike any ship he had ever seen, silent, scared, and ancient. It had no visible weapons, no recognizable propulsion system, yet it moved with impossible speed, defying every known law of physics. The rest of the human fleet kept their distance, engines on standby, weapons armed but not fired. No one wanted to provoke whatever this was, but they had already lost one ship without a trace, and the unease was spreading through the crew like a virus. Carter tapped his console. "Status on the Dauntless." "Still nothing, Captain," Lieutenant Avery responded. Her voice was tense. No debris, no signal. It's like they were erased. Carter exhaled slowly. He had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. Every instinct in his body told him to run, to leave this thing alone. But they had come for answers. "Open a channel," he ordered. "All frequencies." Avery nodded, and the comms light flickered to life. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the United Earth Exploration Fleet. We do not wish for conflict. Identify yourself." For several long seconds, there was silence. Then, the voice returned. "You should not have come." It was the same as before. Mechanical, hollow. But now there was something else. A strange echo, as if many voices were speaking at once. Carter felt a chill crawl up his spine. He exchanged glances with his officers. "Who are you?" He tried again. "Are you the ones who sent the distress signal?" Silence. Then the object moved. It did not turn, did not accelerate. One moment, it was hundreds of kilometers away. The next, it was right there, just outside the fleet's formation. The Resolute's proximity alarm screamed. The crew barely had time to react before a strange pulse rippled through space. The lights flickered. Screens glitched. For a fraction of a second, Carter could feel something in his mind. A presence, cold and vast, like a shadow stretching across the universe, and then it was gone. "Systems are fluctuating," shouted the chief engineer. "Whatever that thing just did, it." Before he could finish, another ship vanished. One blink, and it was gone. This time, the fleet panicked. A nearby destroyer fired its plasma cannons in desperation. The bright energy blasts streaked through space, only to stop midair. They hung there, frozen in time, then reversed direction and slammed back into the ship that fired them. The destroyer exploded instantly, debris scattering in every direction. The bridge of the Resolute went dead silent. Carter gritted his teeth. "All ships, retreat now." Engines flared as the fleet turned, trying to escape. The object remained motionless. It did not pursue. It simply hovered, watching, studying. Then it spoke again. "It is too late." Before anyone could react, a second pulse erupted from the object. But this time, it wasn't an attack. This time, it was a message. A wave of energy surged through the Resolute's systems. The main screen flickered, and suddenly, an image appeared. It was not of the object. It was of a world burning. Cities crumbled under dark skies. Enormous, twisted shapes moved through the ruins, devouring everything in sight. The image flickered again, showing a fleet. Massive warships, powerful beyond imagination, shattered and lifeless. A final transmission played through the speakers. It was not human. It was a desperate, alien voice, filled with terror. "If you receive this, run. They are coming. They are already here." Then, the screen went black. The fleet had seen many horrors in space. Wars, planetary extinctions, deadly alien threats. But this was something else. This was not a war. This was a warning. Carter's hands tightened into fists. The distress signal hadn't been a call for help. It had been a final message from a dying race. And now, humanity was next. The Resolute and the remaining human fleet drifted in stunned silence. The weight of what they had just seen settled over them like a heavy fog. A burning world. A dead fleet. A desperate warning. Captain Elias Carter clenched his jaw, staring at the dark object still hovering in the distance. It made no move to attack. It simply watched. "Captain." Lieutenant Avery's voice trembled slightly. "Should we report back to High Command?" Carter forced himself to think. His mind screamed at him to retreat, to take his people far away from whatever this was. But he knew the truth. This wasn't something they could escape from. If the warning was real, then running wouldn't matter. He turned to his communications officer. "Send a high-priority transmission back to Earth. Encrypt it and mark it as urgent." The officer hesitated. What should we say? Carter's fingers tightened around the edge of his console. Tell them we are not alone. Tell them something is coming. And tell them, he glanced at the dark object again. Tell them we may already be too late. Avery swallowed hard and relayed the message. For a long moment, nothing happened. The fleet kept their distance, engines powered but unmoving, waiting for the unknown entity to make its next move. And then something changed. The dark object shifted. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a station. It was something else entirely. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, twisting and reforming, as if waking from a deep slumber. Strange symbols appeared across its hull, glowing in an eerie red light. And then a hole opened. Not a docking port, not an airlock. It was as if space itself had been torn apart, revealing an empty, endless void. A voice echoed through every ship, this time clearer, stronger. Enter. A shiver ran through the crew. Every instinct screamed that stepping inside was a death sentence, but they had come this far, and Carter knew, if they left now, they might never get another chance to understand what they were dealing with. "We're going in," he said. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one argued. The Resolute moved forward, gliding toward the dark opening. 2 escort ships followed, their weapons primed in case of an ambush. As soon as they crossed the threshold, everything changed. The ship's systems flickered. The external cameras went dark for a moment before stabilizing. And then, the view outside was not the same. They were no longer in open space. Outside the Resolute, an impossible landscape stretched in all directions. It was like a graveyard, filled with the wreckage of thousands of ships, some ancient, some unknown, their designs unlike anything recorded in galactic history. The broken remains of mighty warships drifted in silence, their shattered hulls frozen in time. Carter's breath caught in his throat. "What is this place?" A voice crackled over the comms. It was the captain of one of the escort ships. "Sir, our instruments are failing." "This place." His voice cut out suddenly. The crew watched in horror as the escort ship started dissolving. Its hull peeled away like burning paper, breaking apart piece by piece. The crew inside barely had time to scream before the ship collapsed into nothingness. Gone in seconds. "Reverse course," Carter shouted. "Get us out of here now." The Resolute's engines roared to life. The ship turned, racing back toward the opening, only to see it closing. Faster, faster. The massive tear in space was shrinking, sealing them inside. "Full power," Carter roared. The ship surged forward at maximum thrust, barely slipping through the narrowing gap before it vanished completely. And then they were back. The Resolute drifted in normal space once more, the dark object looming ahead. The fleet was intact, except for the ship they had lost. Carter's breathing was heavy. His crew sat in stunned silence. They had barely escaped, and yet they had no answers. Then, for the first time, the dark object moved away. It was leaving, slowly at first, then faster, disappearing into the blackness of space. "Sir," Avery whispered, "what just happened?" Carter didn't answer right away. He was staring at the console in front of him. A new transmission had appeared. One final message. It wasn't in human language. It wasn't in any known language. But somehow, they all understood it. This was only a glimpse. Carter exhaled slowly. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The crew of the Resolute sat in stunned silence. The dark object had vanished, but the weight of its final message still hung in the air. This was only a glimpse. Captain Elias Carter replayed those words in his head, over and over. A glimpse of what? A warning? A threat? Or something worse, something beyond human understanding? His hands rested on the console, knuckles white. He had led missions into the unknown before, but nothing had ever come close to this. They had seen a graveyard of dead civilizations, a place where time itself seemed to break apart. And yet, the real danger had not yet arrived. He turned to Lieutenant Avery, who was still staring at her screen, eyes wide. Get me a secure link to High Command. We need tow. A sharp beep cut through the air. The communication panel flickered, the encrypted line flashing red. "Sir," Avery said, her voice unsteady, "we're already receiving a message. From Earth." Carter frowned. "Put it through." The screen crackled with static before stabilizing. The image that appeared made the blood in his veins run cold. Admiral Harper, the highest-ranking officer in the United Earth Defense Force, stood in a war room filled with tense-looking officials. Behind them, large holographic displays showed red emergency alerts flashing across every major colony. "Carter," Harper said, skipping any formalities, "tell me exactly what the hell is going on out there." Carter didn't hesitate. "Sir, we made contact with something ancient. We entered what I can only describe as a graveyard of lost civilizations. One of our ships was erased, and before the entity vanished, it left us a final message. A warning." Admiral Harper didn't react at first. Then, in a grim voice, he said, "We already know." Carter felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What do you mean?" Harper took a slow breath. "Because they're already here." A deep silence fell over the bridge. Carter leaned forward. "Explain." Harper's face was set like stone. "It started an hour ago. Every deep space monitoring station near the outer colonies picked up something moving. Objects, huge ones. They're approaching the core worlds at impossible speeds. They don't match any known ship design. There." Static suddenly ripped through the transmission. The screen glitched, flashing with distorted images. And then, for a brief moment, Carter saw something else. Not Harper, not the war room, but a world burning. It was different from the one in the warning message. This one was human. Earth. The vision lasted less than a second, but it felt like an eternity. Then, the screen went black. "Sir," Avery gasped, "we just lost the connection." Carter shot up from his chair. "Try to re-establish it. Now." The crew scrambled, tapping consoles, running diagnostics. But the transmission was completely dead. Then the proximity alarm screamed. "Contact." The sensor officer shouted. "Incoming." From all directions. The main screen flashed to life. Red markers swarmed across the display. They were no longer alone. Dozens, hundreds of unidentified ships emerged from deep space, materializing like ghosts. Their forms were twisted, their hulls covered in dark, pulsing veins, as if they were not just built, but grown. The bridge filled with frantic voices, multiple hostile signatures. "They weren't here a second ago." "How did they?" "Sir, they're surrounding us." Carter's mind raced. He had seen these ships before, in the vision. The ones that had destroyed entire civilizations. "They're the ones who sent the distress signal," he murmured. "Or, the ones who caused it." A new sound filled the air. A signal. A low, droning hum that made Carter's skull ache. It wasn't coming from their communication systems. It was coming from the ships themselves. And then the voice returned. "There is no escape." The enemy ships moved. Faster than anything recorded in history, they closed in. The first shot was fired. It wasn't plasma. It wasn't a laser. It was something worse. A pulse of black energy surged toward the fleet. The moment it made contact with the nearest ship, the hull cracked, not from an explosion, but as if the ship itself was rotting from the inside out. The crew didn't even have time to scream. The ship folded in on itself, disappearing into a swirling mass of shadows. "Open fire," Carter shouted. The Resolute and the remaining human ships unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons, missile barrages, railguns. Every weapon system roared to life. The enemy ships did not evade. They did not shield themselves. They simply absorbed the attacks, their hulls rippling like liquid. Then they answered. A second pulse of energy erupted toward the human fleet. Another ship was hit. Its structure withered in seconds, as if time itself had aged it by 1,000 years. The crew was gone before they even knew they were dead. Carter's chest tightened. This wasn't a battle. This was extermination. "Retreat," he yelled. "Fall back to slip space now." The Resolute's engines flared, along with the remaining ships that could still move. But the enemy vessels were already adjusting, cutting off escape routes with impossible precision. The black signal grew louder. The shadows closed in. And then, a shockwave tore through space, not from the enemy, not from the humans, but from something else. The darkness froze. For the first time, the enemy fleet hesitated. Carter barely had time to process what was happening before a new presence filled the battlefield. A new ship. No, a fleet. They appeared without warning, emerging from what seemed to be pure light, their hulls gleaming with technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Carter's eyes widened. Who the hell? Before he could finish, a voice echoed through the comms. A new voice. You were warned, but perhaps not all is lost. And then, the war truly began. The battlefield was frozen in a moment of impossible silence. On one side, the Dark Fleet, a vast, nightmarish armada, its ships pulsing with an eerie, unnatural energy. They had torn through civilizations, left entire worlds in ruin. They had wiped out thousands without hesitation. On the other, the new arrivals, a fleet of shimmering, radiant vessels, their hulls glowing with a light that seemed to push back the darkness itself. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. And between them, the Resolute, caught in the middle of a conflict far beyond its understanding. Captain Elias Carter stood rigid, his hands gripping the console as he tried to process what was happening. The enemy, the ones who had sent the distress signal, or perhaps the ones it was meant to warn against, had stopped their advance. Their ships, which had moved with terrifying speed and precision moments ago, now hovered in hesitation. This was the first time Carter had seen them react to anything other than blind annihilation. And then the voice returned. Not the cold, hollow voice of the darkness, but the new one. You were warned, but perhaps not all is lost. Carter swallowed hard. Who are you? He demanded. For a brief second, he thought he saw something through the viewports. A shape, humanoid, but vast, made entirely of glowing light, standing inside one of the radiant ships. It wasn't a hologram. It wasn't a trick of the eyes. Something was looking at him. Then, without warning, the battle resumed. The Dark Fleet moved first. As if snapping out of their hesitation, the shadow ships pulsed with black energy, sending waves of destruction toward the luminous newcomers. But this time, the attacks did not connect. The radiant ships responded instantly, their hulls shifting into blinding streaks of light, moving at speeds beyond physics. Each shot that the Dark Fleet unleashed bent away, as if repelled by an invisible force. The Radiant Fleet retaliated. They did not fire weapons. Instead, beams of pure white energy surged from their ships, not as attacks, but as blades of burning light, carving through the darkness like celestial swords. The moment the light touched the enemy ships, the black hulls screeched, twisting and writhing like something alive. For the first time, the darkness felt pain. Carter watched in awe. They can hurt them. Sir, Avery's voice was sharp. One of them is signaling us. A transmission request appeared on the console. No encryption, no language barriers. The Resolute's systems recognized it immediately, as if the knowledge had been there all along. Carter took a steady breath, opened the channel. The bridge lights flickered as a figure appeared on the main screen. A being of pure energy, its form shifting like a living star, its eyes glowing with an intelligence that felt ancient. There was no doubt. This was not human. But it was not like the darkness, either. The being spoke, but not with words. The message arrived in their minds, clear and undeniable. You stand at the precipice of oblivion. Carter's throat went dry. Who are you? The being's light pulsed. We are the architects. We are the last guardians of balance, And you are not meant to be here. Carter's heart pounded. Not meant to be here. This is our galaxy. A moment of silence. Then, no, this is their feeding ground. A hush fell over the crew. The Dark Fleet, feeders. On what? Entire civilizations. Had humanity been expanding into a territory that was never meant for them? Carter forced himself to focus. If you knew about them, why didn't you warn us before? Why send a cryptic distress signal? The being's glow dimmed slightly. Because warnings do not stop hunger. And because we are dying. A cold weight settled in Carter's stomach. Dying. Avery whispered, if they're our best chance at stopping those things, and they're losing, then humanity was already doomed. Before Carter could respond, the battle outside escalated. The Dark Fleet shifted tactics. Their ships began to fuse together, merging into a single massive construct, a writhing, living behemoth of pure shadow. It was adapting. And it was winning. One of the radiant ships was caught. The moment the darkness wrapped around it, the golden light inside flickered. The ship crumbled, its energy consumed, its glow devoured into nothingness. For the first time, the architects had lost a ship, and the tide began to turn. The architect on the screen stared at Carter. You cannot run. You cannot hide. There is only one path left. Carter gritted his teeth. Then tell us what we need to do. The architect's form shifted, flickering with urgency. You are unprepared, but you are not powerless. A sudden jolt rocked the Resolute. The ship's systems lit up, their screens suddenly flooded with data, coordinates, blueprints, strange symbols that made no sense. Avery gasped. Captain, they're giving us something. Some kind of knowledge. Carter turned to the architect. What is this? The last weapon. The only weapon. If you wish to survive, you must use it before it is too late. Outside, the darkness grew, its final form taking shape. The architects fought desperately, but they were outnumbered, outmatched. Carter didn't hesitate. He pointed at the data streams flooding their systems. Can we use it? The engineers scrambled to decode the information. One of them, an older officer with decades of experience, looked up, pale-faced. Sir, this isn't just a weapon. Carter frowned. Then what is it? The officer swallowed. It's a transformation. Silence. Avery's voice was barely a whisper. They aren't just giving us firepower. They're giving us something that can change us. Carter looked back at the architect. You want us to become like you. The glowing beam gave no expression, but its light pulsed in a way that almost felt regretful. We wanted to protect you, but that time has passed. You must choose, remain as you are, and be consumed, or evolve, and fight back. The battle raged outside. The darkness was winning. Humanity had only one chance. Carter clenched his fists. The choice had already been made. The Resolute trembled under the strain of the battle raging outside. The bridge was filled with alarms, flashing red warnings screaming of the impending disaster. The Dark Fleet had begun its final phase, merging into a single, terrifying entity that swallowed light itself. The architects, the luminous beings who had intervened, were losing. Their golden ships, once untouchable, were now flickering, their energy devoured by the growing black mass. And in the center of it all, humanity stood at the edge of extinction. Captain Elias Carter didn't hesitate. He turned to his crew, his voice steady despite the chaos. Activate the sequence. Now. Avery hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console. Sir, we still don't know exactly what this will do to us. Carter met her gaze. We don't have the luxury of doubt. The dark entity outside was already shifting again. Its form writhed like a living void, twisting reality itself as it prepared its final attack. Do it. Avery's hands flew across the controls. The ship's core shuddered, its systems flooding with data that no human mind could fully comprehend. The architect's gift, the transformation, was now activating. A sharp pulse ran through the Resolute. Every console, every wire, every inch of the ship changed. The metal plating rippled like liquid, reshaping itself, glowing with strange energy. The crew screamed, not in pain, but in shock, as something shifted inside them. They could feel it. The ship was no longer just a machine. It was becoming an extension of them. Carter gasped as his vision expanded. No longer limited to his human senses, he could see beyond the visible spectrum. He could hear the dark fleet, not through sound, but through the eerie whispers of their existence. And he could feel power. For the first time, humanity was no longer a fragile species standing on the brink of destruction. They were becoming something more. The Resolute had transformed. No longer just a starship, it was now a living weapon, its systems fused with something ancient and incomprehensible. And then, the dark entity attacked. A wave of pure blackness surged toward them, an all-consuming tide meant to erase their very existence. The Architect's remaining ships tried to shield them, but the darkness ripped through them like paper. Carter didn't think. He acted. Instinct took over as he reached out, not with his hands, but with his mind. The Resolute responded. A pulse of golden-white energy exploded outward, cutting through the black tide like a blade of light. The attack that should have annihilated them instead shattered, dispersing into nothingness. The bridge was silent for a moment. Avery whispered, "Sir, we just stopped it." Carter's heart pounded. He could feel the ship breathing, as if it was alive, as if it was waiting for him to act. "Then we're not done yet," he said. "Target the core of that thing and fire." The Resolute responded in an instant. It moved faster than physics should allow, phasing through space itself. A new weapon system, something far beyond human technology, manifested at the ship's center. It wasn't plasma, wasn't missiles. It was pure energy, the same light that the Architects wielded. The dark entity sensed the threat too late. A single beam launched from the Resolute, cutting across the void like a burning scar. It pierced through the darkness, right into its heart. The creature screamed, not in sound, but in a raw, shuddering wave of agony that reverberated through space itself. The black mass twisted, its form cracking apart, its core collapsing in on itself. The void imploded. One by one, the dark ships disintegrated, their essence burned away by the energy now flowing through the Resolute. The tide of destruction that had swept across countless galaxies was finally breaking. And then, silence. The battle was over. The Architects, their remaining ships barely holding together, drifted toward the Resolute. Their leader's glowing form flickered, weaker than before, but still filled with an undeniable presence. "You have done what we could not," the being said. Carter exhaled, gripping the console, his body still buzzing with the remnants of the transformation. "But at what cost?" he asked. "What are we now?" The Architect studied him. "Not human. Not yet one of us. You are something new." Carter felt a chill. His crew had felt it too. They weren't the same. The knowledge, the power, the connection to something greater, it was all still there. They had changed. The Architect's form dimmed. The darkness is not truly gone. It can never be destroyed, only contained. Carter looked at the ruins of the enemy fleet. Then what happens now? The Architect's light pulsed one last time. "Now you decide what you will become." And with that, the remaining Architects vanished, their bodies dissolving into pure energy, merging with the fabric of space itself. Carter looked around the bridge. His crew, his people were waiting for his command, waiting to know what came next. The galaxy was safe, for now, but humanity had crossed a line it could never uncross. And whatever came next, they were no longer just human. The stars had never looked the same since the battle. Captain Ilias Carter stood at the bridge of the Resolute, staring out into the vastness of space. His ship, his crew, were no longer what they had been before. The moment they had accepted the Architect's transformation, They had crossed a threshold that no human had ever crossed before. They weren't just human anymore. They were something else. The ship had fused with them in ways they still didn't fully understand. Carter could feel its systems, not just as consoles and wires, but as extensions of himself. The engines thrummed in the back of his mind. The weapons were a part of his will. Every star outside wasn't just light. It was data, patterns, knowledge flowing through his thoughts like an instinct he had always possessed, but never unlocked. He wasn't alone in this. Every member of his crew felt it too. "We should go back," Avery said, stepping up beside him. She had changed as well. He could sense her presence in a way that wasn't just visual or audible. He knew where she was without looking. He could hear her heartbeat without listening. "Go back where?" Carter asked. His voice felt heavier than before. "Earth. Home." She hesitated. "If we can still call it that." Carter sighed. That was the real question, wasn't it? Could they go back? Could they return to humanity after what they had become? Before he could answer, the ship spoke. Not with words. Not with an ice-cold efficiency, but with a feeling. A presence. A warning. Something was coming. The sensors picked it up moments later. A distortion in space. A ripple in reality itself. Carter turned sharply. "What the hell is that?" The distortion grew, expanding outward like a wound in the fabric of the universe. Lights flickered across the Resolute's hull as the ship reacted, its systems aligning to face whatever was emerging. Then, it appeared. A vessel. Massive. Ancient. Unlike anything they had seen before. It was neither of the darkness nor of the architects. It was something else entirely. A ship so vast that it seemed to bend space around it, covered in markings that pulsed with an eerie, shifting glow. Its surface was neither metal nor organic, but something in between, something alive. A cold realization settled over Carter. They had spent so much time fighting the darkness, believing it to be the ultimate threat. But what if it wasn't? What if there were others? The Resolute shuddered. A deep, resonating tone echoed through its systems, not an attack, but a message. It was speaking to them. Avery's hands hovered over the controls. "Captain, I don't think this thing is hostile, but it knows what we are." Carter took a slow breath. Open a channel. The moment the connection was made, a presence filled the ship. Not a voice, not a transmission, but an overwhelming sense of awareness. And then words. Not spoken, but delivered directly into their minds. "You are not what you were." Carter clenched his jaw. "No, we're not. You have taken the architect's path. You have changed your kind forever." Carter exchanged a glance with Avery. "Who are you?" There was a long silence. Then, "We are the ones who came before. We are the reason the darkness exists. And now you have stepped into the war that never ends." A weight dropped into Carter's chest. What war? The war of balance. The architects sought to contain the darkness, but they were never its creators. We were. The bridge fell silent. The crew, listening through the open channel, froze. Carter's mind raced. "You're saying, you made them." "We shaped the first shadows. We thought we could control entropy itself. We were wrong. And so we ran. We let the architects take our burden. And now you have become their heirs." A cold realization spread through him. The architects had given them their power, not as a gift, but as a responsibility. Humanity was now part of something far bigger than they had ever imagined. The presence on the other side of the transmission studied them. Carter could feel it. An intelligence older than anything he had encountered. Then, the entity spoke again. "You have a choice. Return to your people, knowing you are no longer one of them. Or come with us. Learn the truth, and decide if you are ready to take the next step." Avery inhaled sharply. "Captain, if we go with them, we may never return." Carter didn't respond immediately. His mind was turning, racing. He looked back at his crew, the people who had changed with him. They weren't the same humans they had been when they first launched into deep space. They had evolved. They had become something more. He turned his gaze to the ancient vessel, hovering in the void like a silent judge. The architects were gone. The darkness had been pushed back. But the war was far from over. Carter set his jaw. They had already crossed one threshold. What was one more? He gave the order. Follow them. The Resolute moved, and humanity stepped into the unknown.